Welcome to Learn English Journey. My name is Laura Bennett, and I never imagined I would be telling this part of my life to anyone, much less to a whole audience. I am 48 years old, born and raised in Brighton, the kind of seaside town where the wind always smells a little like salt, and the gulls argue loudly over nothing. Our house sits on a quiet street not far from the water. The windows face east, so the first light of morning creeps in early, sliding across the floor like a patient visitor. For a long time, that light felt like home. These days, it feels like a mirror, asking questions I avoided for years. I have been married to Martin for 25 years. He is 52, once a civil servant who kept careful lists and loved a structured day. When he retired early, we imagined long walks on the promenade, museum afternoons, and reading novels side by side. Instead, the days softened into something shapeless. Martin grew attached to the living room sofa, the way vines cling to an old brick wall, slowly at first, then all at once. He said he was tired, that he deserved to rest, that the world could wait. I told myself not to complain. After all, hadn't he worked hard for years? But little by little, his rest became a routine that swallowed entire afternoons, long stretches of television, drowsy naps, another program, and then bed. He rarely wanted to go out. He rarely wanted anything. Our children grew up within those walls. George, our son, is 26 now, living in Manchester and working in IT. Clara, our daughter of 23, shares a small flat with a friend in Oxford while finishing her master's degree in education. When they were little, our home was busy with spilled cereal, muddy shoes, and school projects that required too much glue. I used to bake on Sundays. Martin would read the newspaper aloud, and the children would roll their eyes when he added commentary to the headlines. Somewhere along the way, the laughter thinned. I kept baking anyway, the way you keep watering a plant that has already given up. I work as a floral designer. It started as a hobby, arranging tulips for the neighbors, turning old jars into vases, tying ribbons with hands that learned the language of knots. Over time, it became a small business. Brides trusted me with their colors and hopes. Funerals trusted me with their silence. I love the weight of flowers in my hands, the way delicate things can hold a room together. I suppose I believed I could hold my family together like that too, gently, consistently, without making a fuss. But families are not bouquets. You cannot tie them with string. On the morning when everything shifted, the sky over Brighton was the color of unpolished silver. It was Saturday, and I had planned to visit the open-air market for peonies, then stop by Mrs. Davenport's cafe to pick up her order of small table arrangements. I put on my navy coat and reached for the front door. The cold metal knob felt awake beneath my fingers. I turned it and stepped outside, only to remember, a moment too late, that my bank card was in yesterday's coat. I muttered something to myself, slipped back inside, and let the door fall gently behind me. The house was quiet, except for the muffled chatter of a television presenter. I stood in the hallway, slid my hand into the pocket of the other coat, and froze. From the living room came a voice I recognized so intimately that I had long ago stopped noticing its shape, and yet the words felt like a stranger had opened our window and called my name. "Yes, darling," Martin said, his tone soft, careful, almost youthful. "I'm listening." Time didn't stop. It rearranged itself. The hallway seemed longer, the walls narrower, the air thinner. I pressed my back against the cool plaster and stared at my own breath. Darling. That wasn't a word we used. Not in many years. I have always disliked sweet nicknames and melodrama, and Martin always rolled his eyes at couples who called each other honey on speakerphone in the supermarket. We had relied on a practical tenderness, cups of tea left on nightstands, a hand on the shoulder as we passed in the kitchen. That word did not belong in our house anymore, and yet it drifted down the hallway like a thread leading somewhere I didn't want to follow. I stood absolutely still, my fingers curling around the thin fabric of my coat pocket. I heard the low murmur of a woman's voice through the phone, too faint to understand, but clear enough to know she was there, fully there, in my living room without setting foot in it. Yes, he said again, smiling in a way I could hear. Tomorrow evening. I miss you too. The words hit me physically, like stepping into the sea in winter. My chest tightened. My stomach turned hot and then cold, and somewhere far away, a part of me started arranging facts into a line, a voice, a promise, the word miss, the calendar day called tomorrow. I had not cried, not yet. There is a moment when your life changes in front of you, and your body refuses to catch up, as if it needs permission to feel what it already knows. When the call ended, I walked into the living room. Martin was still holding the phone in his hand, thumb hovering over the screen. He looked at me as if I had been conjured by a magician who hadn't warned him about the final trick. For a heartbeat, the two of us were a painting. Him on the sofa, comfortable as an old habit. Me standing, coat half buttoned, the door behind me a thin line of cold air. Who was that? I asked. My voice was even, but the evenness felt like a mask I was lifting with both hands. He opened his mouth and no sound came. Then he swallowed and said, "Someone I'm seeing. Her name is... It doesn't matter." The sentence fell between us and lay there like broken glass. I took a breath through my nose because it felt safer than opening my mouth. "Someone you're seeing," I repeated, as if testing the hinges of each word. "So you have been involved with another person." He nodded once, a small gesture that carried the weight of years. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said. And then, as if that weren't thin enough, he added, "She makes me feel awake." I blinked. Awake. The couch behind him was a witness. The television was a witness. The wind at our window. The stubborn houseplants on the sill. The diary I kept in the kitchen drawer. Everything had watched him sleep through months and years, and now he had the energy to be awake for someone else. I felt something like a wire tighten from my throat to my stomach. "I gave you 25 years, I said, my voice steady, not because I was calm, but because I was standing on a narrow bridge and there was no room to lose my balance. I raised our children, cooked more meals than I can count, and kept this house breathing. I asked for walks. I asked for conversation. I asked for a life shared. You said you were tired." He looked away, the posture of a man who has lost his keys and doesn't want to admit they were never in his pocket. "I know I've failed you," he said. "I'm sorry, Laura." For a second, the word sorry almost touched me. Then I saw, as clearly as I had ever seen anything, that sorry could not clean a place it never entered. A decision formed in me with surprising calm. "Call her," I said. "Tell her you're going to see her today." He blinked. "Today?" "Run, walk, crawl," I said, and the steadiness of my tone surprised me. "I don't mind how you go, but you can't stay here. Not tonight." He stared at me as if I had spoken a foreign language, and he had understood every word. His face folded in on itself, the way paper creases before it tears. "This is my home," he said at last, small and soft. "It was," I said. "You let it become a waiting room. You can't wait here anymore." He stood slowly, took his wallet and car keys from the table, and then stopped, looking at me with a kind of frightened grief I hadn't seen on his face since his father's funeral. "Please, Laura," he said. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you." I did not answer. Silence is a language, and in that moment it said everything I needed it to say. He left, closing the door with a care that did not match the damage already done. I sat at the kitchen table and put my face in my hands. The wood smelled faintly of lemon oil and old newspapers. I looked across the room at the sofa, the place where whole weekends had quietly gone to sleep, and it looked different now, as if someone had moved it half an inch to the left while I wasn't watching. The house, emptied of his weight, felt brighter and lonelier at the same time. I made tea, not because I wanted it, but because hands need a task when the heart has too many. Memories came like waves. George at 6, missing his front teeth, clutching a toy airplane. Clara at 9, snipping colored paper into careful stars. Martin and me painting the front door a cheerful blue the year we moved in. I had always trusted the past to soften the edges of the present. Instead, it sharpened them, showing me precisely what had changed and when I had stopped naming it. I went to my small studio at the back of the house and stood among the buckets. Roses should be trimmed at an angle. Lilies bleed pollen. Eucalyptus leaves scent your fingers for hours. Flowers are honest. They do not promise forever. They offer now, fully, and then they go. I think a part of me had been living like a flower stuck in a book, pressed flat, remembered but not alive. Standing there, I felt something else arrive, thin at first, like a single root finding water. Courage doesn't rush in through the front door. It seeps under the threshold and waits to be noticed. The next morning, the courage brought company, clarity. I called Clara first. When she answered, I almost hung up. I didn't want my pain to become part of her day, but her voice was warm and practical, and when I told her, she didn't gasp or say the wrong thing. She drew a breath as if bracing us both against the wind. "Mum," she said, "you don't need to carry this for him. You don't need to make it reasonable. If he stepped out, that's his choice and his consequence. You are allowed to choose yourself." George called me back at lunchtime. He has always been slower to speak than his sister, careful with his words the way he used to be careful with his Lego towers. "I hate that this happened," he said simply, "but you're strong. Don't mistake patience for weakness. We're here for you, whatever you decide." After the calls, I sat by the window and watched a pair of gulls wheel against the white sky. The house held its breath. In the afternoon, there was a knock on the door. 3 gentle taps, as if whoever stood outside already felt like a trespasser. I opened it to find a woman perhaps 10 years younger than me, with a neat scarf and eyes that didn't quite know where to rest. She introduced herself and said she needed to speak with Martin. The world slowed again, but in a different way now. I could have raised my voice. I could have slammed the door. Instead, I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "Martin doesn't live here today," I said. "He has decisions to make, and so do I. I won't tell you what to do, but I will tell you what I'm doing. I'm choosing my life." She looked at me as if I had handed her a word she didn't know how to pronounce. Her mouth opened. then closed. She nodded once, turned, and left without a single dramatic line, without a storm. It was almost ordinary. Pain often is. That evening, Martin returned, and we argued in the quiet way people argue after years of speaking softly. We didn't throw plates or slam doors. We used sentences like tools, building and dismantling at the same time. I told him what it felt like to be invisible in my own home. He told me he didn't know how to be needed any longer. He said he was sorry again, and I said, sorry had become a ceiling he kept bumping into. Then silence came back and sat with us. It didn't leave. In the days that followed, I did something I had always been afraid of. I made appointments with a solicitor to learn how separation works, how property is divided, how a long marriage is put into paperwork without losing its history. My hands shook when I signed the first document. I walked back along the seafront with a scarf wrapped tight and told the wind what I had done, as if it could carry my words safely away. At night I cried, not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but the ordinary kind that comes like rain, unexpected, steady, cleansing. I cried for the years that felt wasted, and then I cried for the years still ahead that might not be. Some nights I couldn't sleep. I would make chamomile tea and walk through the house, touching the backs of chairs as if to greet old friends. I found things I had kept without knowing. Ticket stubs from a play we loved, a postcard from George's first trip to Spain, a painting Clara made of our house with a crooked roof and smiling windows. I realized that I had spent so long looking after our family that I had forgotten to keep looking after the person who did the looking after. It is possible to disappear without leaving. One afternoon, my neighbor, Mrs. Davenport, came by to collect her cafe arrangements. She is in her 70s and does not believe in pretending. She studied my face for about 3 seconds and said, "You're walking uphill, love." I nodded, and she set down her basket. "Then take smaller steps," she said, and patted my arm. That advice changed the shape of my days. Smaller steps looked like this. I moved the sofa to a new angle so it didn't face the television directly. And the room felt different, like a sentence altered by a comma. I opened the windows more often, letting the sea air sweep through the curtains and lift the smell of old routines. I planted rosemary in the back garden because I wanted something hardy, something that likes wind. I joined a morning walking group that meets by the pier. We talk about everything and nothing as the gulls bicker overhead. I bought a second-hand bicycle with a wicker basket and rode it along Marine Parade at a gentle pace that matched my thoughts. Work shifted too. I said yes to a charity gala that needed centerpieces and donated half my fee. I taught a weekend class at the community center on simple bouquets, and I watched hands that had never held pruning shears learn to listen to stems. Once, a woman cried because the arrangement in front of her surprised her with its beauty, and we both laughed at the suddenness of emotion. I came home that day smelling of roses and eucalyptus and something else, a feeling I had missed for a long time, usefulness that didn't ask me to vanish to provide it. When the paperwork finally came through and the separation became official, I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of tea and looked around. The television was off. The room was quiet. I half expected my heart to shatter like a dropped cup. Instead, it felt steady, like a drum being tested before a song. The house did not feel ruined. It felt ready. I realized that grief and gratitude can live together like housemates who don't always agree but learn to share the kettle. A few days later, George came down for the weekend, and helped me carry boxes to the charity shop. We kept the blue door but changed the handle. Small, silly, perfect. He installed a dimmer switch in the dining room, and we ate fish and chips on the floor like students. He told me work stories and laughed at the gull that nearly stole his dinner. Clara arrived the next weekend with secondhand novels and a new haircut. We walked along the shore and let the spray touch our faces, and she said, "Mum, your voice sounds lighter." I hadn't noticed until she said it, and then I did. My words no longer worked so hard to hold the ceiling up. When I think about Martin now, I don't feel the same burning shame or furious disbelief. I feel something gentler and sadder. We built a life that grew quiet and stayed quiet until someone opened a window and different air rushed in. That doesn't excuse the hurt. It names the weather. I know he has his own path to walk. I know I have mine. Sometimes, usually on evenings when the sky shines a soft pink over the water, I imagine him taking a walk, finally, somewhere he hasn't been in years. I hope he chooses to wake up for himself, not for somebody else. I am learning small, unglamorous things. How to hang a shelf straight without asking for help. How to cook for one without making it feel like a punishment. How to say yes to coffee with a friend even when sadness tells me to stay home. How to enjoy a museum alone, where no one asks if I'm nearly finished. I am discovering that growing older can be a kind of widening, not a narrowing. I am practicing being kind to myself in practical ways, going to bed on time, buying the good bread, keeping fresh flowers in the hallway, even when no one is coming over. I don't know what the future is supposed to look like. I only know it is larger than the living room where I watched the same shows on repeat for too long. I might travel. I might repaint the kitchen a soft green like sea glass. I might take a class in pottery and make bowls that wobble charmingly on the table. I might meet someone kind at the market while inspecting plums. And if I do not meet anyone at all, I will still have a life worth narrating, because it is mine. There is a freedom in that sentence that I had forgotten. Some nights, I stand at my bedroom window and watch the lights along the pier. The wind presses against the glass like a cat asking to be let in. I think about the woman I was at 23 and the woman I am now, and I want to tell her two things. First, you were right to hope. Hope is not naive. It's fuel. Second, when the road turns sharply, you will not fall. You will sway, you will cry, you will pause, but you will not fall. Your feet will find the ground, and you will move forward, even if it is only the length of a room at first. If you are listening to this, and some part of your story looks like mine, I won't tell you what to do. I will tell you what helped me, naming what was true, even when it hurt. Asking for advice from people who could speak calmly when I could not, taking small steps when big ones felt impossible, and refusing to make myself smaller to fit a situation that needed to change. Self-respect is not loud. It is a quiet habit that grows strong when you feed it every day. The day the documents arrived, final and official, I made myself a promise. I would not define the next chapter by what ended, but by what began. So I began simply. I opened the windows and let the breeze carry the scent of the sea into the hallway. I placed a vase of white lilies on the table and watched the light land inside their petals. I wrote a list not of chores, but of moments I wanted to build. Sunrise walks, new recipes, a weekend in the Cotswolds, a letter to my sister I had been meaning to write, a Saturday with no television at all. I tucked the list into the kitchen drawer next to my diary, so I would find it the next time I went searching for something else. This is my life now, quieter in some ways, brighter in others, shaped by choice rather than inertia. I am grateful for the years that taught me loyalty and tenderness, and I am grateful for the wake-up call that felt like an earthquake, but turned out to be a door. Brighton is still Brighton. The gulls still argue. The sea still throws itself at the shore. The wind still insists. But I am not the same woman passing through this city. I walk faster some days, slower on others. I talk to strangers' dogs. I press rosemary between my fingers to remind myself that some plants are built for weather. And so am I. It is never too late to begin again. It is never too late to rearrange a room, a schedule, a heart. If I were speaking to the version of myself who stood in the hallway and heard a word that did not belong to her, I would say, breathe. You are not losing yourself. You are noticing yourself. There is a difference. You will make a home again, even if it is the same address. You will learn to trust your voice when it says enough. You will laugh, and not because the television told you it was time. And if you are wondering what I chose in the end, I chose myself. I chose truth over habit, fresh air over stale rooms, gratitude over bitterness. I chose to open the front door not to return for a forgotten card, but to step outside and begin walking toward the life that was waiting for me anyway. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more English stories and lessons. Your support means the world to us. See you next time here on Learn English Journey.